Hello everybody, welcome to Catherine Sews. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I'm super excited to show you speed sewing or power sewing. Today I'll be sewing up these pleated pants that I did the drafting for in my previous video. But I want to show you how you can sew your projects up super quickly, and it doesn't have to be for these particular pants or pants at all, really. You can apply these same processes to any project. All we're going to be doing today is sort of batching the tasks at each station in the sewing room. So for quite a few of the techniques, I already have full videos that show those techniques in more detail, so I'll link them at the appropriate steps in the video. But right now, I just want to take you through how I actually do sew all of my sewing projects. Today's video is all about speed, so let's get busy. What I want to show you now is how I use my time super efficiently to sew these up quickly. I've already made very similar pants multiple times, and so I don't need to follow the instructions step by step, as I like to do the first time I make a garment. Instead, I'm just going to have this whole pile beside me at the sewing machine. I'll sew everything I can to each piece, place it on the next pile beside my serger, serge everything I can, place it in the next pile, which will go to the iron. So I have everything cut out and ready to go now, and I interfaced half of both pieces of the waistband. I interfaced 2 of the fly extension pieces, and I put a little bit of interfacing just on the edge of that slash pocket because it is on the bias and I don't want it to end up stretching there. So let's do round 1. On the top of my pile are the 2 fly extension pieces that I interfaced, and one of them gets matched up with its opposite, but then the other one just stays single. If you wrap right over left, the one that stays single is the one that is curving off to my left. So that one's going to go right directly into the pile by my serger. The other interfaced piece is going to get sewn to its matching piece, just the edge of my presser foot around the curved edge. Good. And I'll just trim down the edge there, any interfacing that's sticking out, and any excess fabric around the curved area. Good. Then I'll flip that one right side out, and then that one is going to go straight to the iron. Next on the pile is the waistband, and those 2 pieces are going to go straight to the serger. Now I've got the 2 backs, and I've marked the darts just by cutting a little notch at the top of each arm of the dart, and by putting a pin across the point of the dart. I'm just going to put those 2 notches together, and my pin goes vertically toward those notches. That's where I'm going to start sewing. This pin marking the point, I'll just tuck that in sideways. Having my pin marking both wrong sides means that I know I've got a right and a left, like a mirror image, even if I can't tell the right and wrong side of my fabric. Start right there with a back tack. I hold this pin directly in front of my needle. Whatever you're holding in front of the needle is where you're going to go. And my last few stitches are right along the edge of the fold. And contrary to most instructions, I do a tiny back tack at the end of darts. So that's what you want to see, a really long, skinny dart that tapers off to nothing. So those 2 back pieces now, I'll keep them together, and they're going to go straight to the serger. Now on the front, the diagonal edge of the front is where the lining gets. So with those 2 edges together, on this fabric it is a bit hard to tell the right and the wrong side. So if I kind of keep them together like this and just open up, I know this is my right side and I can place my pocket on that edge. Staying organized, keeping pieces together really helps avoid mistakes that just take up so much of your time. Right off the edge of the first side and right straight onto the other one. I do keep them chained together because we're going to be going 3 times here. Hit needle up, lift up, and turn around for an understitch on that lining. My seam allowance here is staying out to my left. My lining is going out over top of it, and I'll be sewing just inside that lining edge. And I want to make sure I've got it opened out fully, and the next one's being pulled along at the same time here so that I can go right into the second side. Again, seam allowance coming out to my left, the lining goes over it, and then right into the second side. And then at the end here, lift up, pull it back, flip the lining under, and now I'll do my top stitch. That under stitch gives me a nice edge there. I don't need to run to the iron first. I can just go right into my top stitch. That's another reason why the straight pocket is easier. I don't have to stop in between to clip my curves. And then I can just clip those apart. So there we go. It's sewn, understitched, and top stitched just lightning fast. Alrighty, so now I can do my pleats. And I'm going from the center edge out toward the side. So if I find my first notch, bring it to the one to the left of it. And the second notch to the one to the left of it. And I'll leave the pocket out of the way and just sew across the top of those pleats. And I'm sewing pretty close to the edge so that this seam line doesn't show later. Same thing to the other side. And then one more thing I can do to my fronts before I go to the serger is to put on the pocket bag. This whole curved edge I'll just sew together at the 15 line or 5/8 line. You notice I don't do a lot of pinning, I just kind of organize as I go. Make sure I can see both edges so I know I'm not missing them. And same thing to the other side. Alright, over at the serger, I'm going to be serging the outside edge of the pockets and the center front edge as well. I like to serge with the good side of the fabric up because that's the nicer side of the serging as well. I also want to do the center back edge. On the fly extension, I'll just serge around the curved edge. And I'll serge the uninterfaced edge of the waistband pieces. And then those pieces go to the iron. At the iron on that first fly piece, I just want to get the seam right out at the edge. Press that flat. And even this piece, it was only serged, but I like to still press it just to set the thread of the serging and get that piece to lay flat. Same on the waistband, just a little press along that serged edge. And when I was cutting the pocket bag, I did pay attention to the placement of the stripes so that they would line up like that, because that looks beautiful. For the pleat that's closest to the pocket, I can just get a little shot of steam too. But this one that's closer to the center that I cut on the grain line, I can fold my pant leg back in half like that and press a crease that goes right into that pleat. That pinstripe went right into that pleat, so nice. So with that crease all the way down the front, and then those pleats just sit so nice. One last thing to press, and that is the back dart. And vertical darts pressed toward the center. There's my serged edge, so I know that's the center. If you have a tailor's ham, awesome. If not, you can use the end of your ironing board. So with each piece I've pressed, I'm going to keep it as I pressed it in the pile that's going back to my sewing machine. So that was round one. Round one is done, and that took 29 minutes. So I'm back at the sewing machine for round two. And so I'm going to be sewing the center front just from this pin down. So leaving space for the fly. So how I placed that pin was just putting the fly extension against it, and then at least 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch up from the bottom of this fly extension. That's where I want to have my pin. I'm not going to sew right to the inseam, but just maybe an inch or two. Good, then I'll take the single layer fly extension and put it right side together with the right hand side of the pants. And I'm just going to be sewing down at the edge of my presser foot. That will go past where I just sewed. So I open this up down here so I can sew right into that seam allowance. This whole left hand side of the pant is out of the way. And then just like the pocket, I'm just going to lift and turn. And now I'm going to understitch, pushing this fly extension out over the seam allowance. So this is exactly like that pocket. And then again, lift and turn. Now that fly extension tucks under, and I'm folding it right from that seam is right out at the edge at the top here. But then at the bottom here, I don't keep the seam at the edge. I just bring the fold right to the top of that crotch seam there. This is a top stitch that will show, and it'll be right down that fold. And this time I do stop right at the top of that seam. Alrighty, so that is the front edge of the front part of the pant that comes over. And now for the other side, of the fly, which is where we'll start with the zipper and the double layer fly extension. So I need to switch to the zipper foot. I want to put it on the left and move my needle to the left. Now this is the left hand side of the pant. I want to take the zipper and go right side down onto that edge with the raw edges of the zipper at the top, and take my double layer fly extension and put that on top. So the zipper is sandwiched in between the two layers. I just keep my edges together as I go down. And then this one also comes past that seam, that center front seam, right down into the seam allowance. So now the right hand side of the pant is getting out of the way. So that's nice. And now I want to edge stitch just beside the zipper. Okay, so the zipper is attached to the left side of the pant. The right side comes over, covering over the zipper, maybe even a 1/4 inch overlap there, so that that zipper stays nicely hidden. And then we're going to pin down that front edge. So the fly is pinned closed and making sure it's all sitting nicely. And then we look inside. The zipper is already attached to this side, so now I need to attach it to this side. So wherever it wants to sit, according to how it's pinned, now I'm going to use my zipper foot again to sew right beside the zipper onto the single layer of the fly extension. I kind of like this, that the pattern comes with this fly top stitching template. With my friction erasable pen, I'm just going to mark like a dotted line around there. Yeah. And I'll be sewing down and around so that the fly stays pinned closed like this, but the back extension comes out of your way. Obviously, if I just sewed right through, I wouldn't be able to open the zipper. So the back moves out of your way, and then from the other side, I'll be sewing just until I encounter this bump. I'm done with the zipper foot now, switching back to the regular foot. There you can see underneath that the fly extension's out of the way. Everything's sitting nice and flat. And a nice smooth curve as you swing around toward the center front. So I might just stop there. Little back tag. Yeah. Push the extension back over, and then now you're just going to finish off that edge just with a little back tag. Good. My pins can come out. The zipper is lovely. Perfect. And then inside here, I can cut off the excess zipper now that it's secured with that back tag. And just so the whole thing doesn't open up every time, I just want to secure down the corner of this back tag there without getting onto the pant. So I just feel it right there. So just that little back tag kind of keeps it together from there. Perfect. Alrighty, so the fly is done. That was quick. That took 15 minutes for the fly. The 2 layers of the pocket at the front here, I really could have sewn and serged those edges together. That would have been fine. But now, here's how I want to deal with that. I want this to come right to this edge of the zipper. So I'm going to tuck that in. Okay. And with that tucked in, I'm going to reach underneath and grab the seam allowance here. Good. I'm grabbing that seam allowance, flipping it over. I'm going to have the stay part or the pocket part sticking out, and I'm just going to be sewing right along that little tiny edge of seam allowance that I have left there. So I'm not catching the front, I'm just catching the seam allowance of the fly to the edge of the pocket piece. So then when that pocket flips back, now it's beautifully clean lined against the front of the pocket. That's the inside. That looks nice enough to be the outside, don't you think? So this is the left-hand side of the pant. The fly is going this way, so those edges just work together nicely. But on the other side, where the fly extension comes in, I don't need so much of this stay part. Okay, so let's look at it this way. The lining comes across flat there, the pocket goes back. Everything in between is nice and flat. I put a pin just even with the seam allowance there, here, so I can fold this bit over, and that's how I want that to sit inside. Good, just like that. And now I reach in, grab that seam allowance, flip out. Okay, so the other side is the same, except that I need less of that pocket stay because that zipper extension is coming into this side of the pant. So also right there. I never worry about threads like that because they will get serged off when I serge these side seams. Okay, then we take that to the serger. And I like to serge with the front up so that when I press my seams to the back, the good side of the serging is showing. When I get to the bottom of the leg, I'll just open it out and serge straight across the bottom. And I know which way is the back now because I know I've got the good side of the serging facing up. So I push the seam allowance with the good side of the serging facing up. Starting at the bottom of the other side so that I know I've got the front facing up. And then across the bottom of that leg. And make sure the good side of the serging is facing up so that I know my seam allowance is going toward the back. Press those two long seams with the seam allowance going toward the back. Kind of give a tug so you know it's opened all the way and that you won't have any little ridge on the other side. Press from the outside as well just to be sure that that seam is laying nicely. Round 2 is about 30 minutes and now I'm on to round 3 where I'll just sew the inseam and attach the waistband. So I've pinned together and I'm sewing the inseam. So that's front and back right side together at the 15 line or 5/8 line. Okay, I'll be taking that inseam to the serger in a moment. While we're still here at the regular machine, I'm going to attach the 2 waistband pieces. Remember we added 3 inches to my half waist measurement, so that was to include the fly extension. But on one side, the fly folds back, and so we only need that extension on one side. So there'll be some extra hangover on the other side. I want to have at least a little bit of seam allowance sticking out over that front edge. I need that seam allowance so that I can finish this edge of the waistband off. After a little bit of seam allowance sticking out. I don't need any extra sticking out here. The first time I used this pant pattern, I added a bit of seam allowance at the center back to give me a full inch of seam allowance at the back waist. I'll show you why that's important to me later. And the dart goes toward the center, and my side seams will go toward the back. So I'll just get that waistband pinned and then sew right across the waist edge. So, serging the inseam. And that's just the last thing that needs to be serged. chaining one inseam to the other just helps me to find it. It just makes it quicker to continue this seam right through. And to the iron. I already pressed the side seams flat, so I just want to make sure that stays nice and flat, that I'm not disturbing that as I press the inseam. Again, I want the inseam to go toward the back so I can tell which is the front and back, just finding that good side of the serging. We are in the home stretch. I have one pant leg inside the other so that they are now right sides together. So I'm going to bring those two inseams together and pin there. And because I have that stripe and I want it to match up, I'll do some careful pinning there as well. I want that stripe to come together nicely at the center back. Now, do you remember I said that I added an inch of seam allowance to the center back of the waistband? Beyond the regular 5/8 of an inch, I added to make a full inch of seam allowance at that back waist. I really like having that as a place to make easy adjustments. That's why the waistband is on before we've sewn up that back seam. Now to sew that, I really want to nail those seams together there. I want that to come together just perfectly. So I'm putting a pin right underneath that seam, coming out underneath the seam on the other side, back out and through. That should be good. Okay, so now when I sew this inseam, I'll be starting at the 25 line, 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch, and I'll sew straight 1 inch all the way through the waistband. And then as soon as I'm past the waistband, I'm going to angle over to the 5/8 line or 15 line, just above where the back rise starts to curve. So straight down here at 1 inch. And I'm taking that pin out at the last second because your presser foot can shift it, and I want that pin to hold those two in place till the very last second. From there, I'm going to pick up where that center back starts to curve, and I'm going to be sewing right toward the 15 line there. So by the time I get down here, I want to be at that 15 line. Good. There we are. And then I just need to line up with where I sewed that bit of the center front seam earlier. I'm going to be heading to the iron, but you know what? First, I'm going to, oh, look at that. That's a thing of beauty. So nicely lined up. Oh my gosh, that's pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. Okay. So before I iron this, I'm going to just finger press that center back seam open, bring my other edge down, and pin it from the outside. Nice. Look at that. And then I just want to try these on and make sure I'm happy with the fit before I finish off this waistband. So the waist feels amazing. Like the waist is super comfy now. I'm so glad I added that inch. But I'm having a debate. I haven't made pleated pants honestly since the early 90s, but I always did them this way where they were just free from the waistband. But I didn't have a tummy in the early 90s, and now I've got a bit of a tummy, which I'm always self-conscious of, and I think it looks nicer if I stitch those pleats down there, don't you think? Here, I just think that looks just a little messy. I'm going to just put a pin right like that, and then I think that kind of gives a little bit of a flatter front, right? And so I'm going to cheat and stitch right through everything, like right through the pocket and the stay, and I'm just going to stitch the top of the pockets for about 1.25 inches, 3 centimeters. Just makes me feel just a little more together in the front. So you can see where I've pinned it, and my pins go right through. So I'm going to be stitching the pleats down right to the inside of the pocket, which I think I actually really like because it really does keep the front flat. So of course you can do this little stitch kind of when I just sewed across the top. You can stitch down, but I think I'm going to like it going right through the pocket. Yeah, I think that looks good. 1.5 inches on the center one, 1.25 inches on this side one. And you want to have a really good match in your thread and very small back tacks. So now I just ran to the iron and pressed my center back seam open and flat. I do like having this inch seam allowance just in case I ever do need to adjust the waist in or out. I just open up this little section of the waistband and it's all together for me and I can just make that adjustment. This is more the way menswear is done and it's really handy. Okay, to finish off this waist, fold the waistband back on itself but not bringing your edges together. Instead, you need that bit of serged edge sticking down, this little bit of seam allowance sticking out. I wish I had a bit more. And now I'm going to sew right beside this fly extension, right there. Good, that'll do just fine. Then I jam my finger in there, poke that out nice and square and pointy. And then this serged edge, the reason we needed it hanging lower is now it needs to come below that seam line. That's where we're going to be stitching in the ditch, and we need to be able to catch that serged edge. Good, other side. So on this side, this is where I didn't need that 2 inches. Same thing, I'm bringing it, folding the waistband right side together, but having that serged edge hanging down below, and now I'll be sewing just beside that fly extension. And then here I can trim off that extra fabric. Jam my finger in and flip that right side out. And I'm just going to zip up and make sure that that is sitting nice and level. That's fine. I don't like this though, where that's coming out. I'm going to be able to catch that in the next step. So here we are now, we're going to stitch in the ditch. So I don't want to see that edge. I'm going to roll that to the inside. Get that looking really good. I've got this serged edge hanging down, perfect. I'm going to pin right in the ditch, right there, catching that back edge. And I'll make my way along the whole waistband, get that center lined up, nice. So all my pins are pointing towards where I'm going to be starting, which is this end, so that I have the edge on my right. And now I can either stitch in the ditch and then it gets hidden completely, but I think today I'm going to sew on the edge here. Either way is fine, as long as you're consistent. Okay, my friends. Instead of a button, I think I'm just going to do hooks on the inside and hem the bottom. When I was trying them on, I marked the hem. So I'm going to sew in my hooks and sew the hem by hand, and then I'll show you how it looks. Okay, everybody, I hope you learned a lot from that today. I hope you enjoyed watching the process unfold. And I definitely had fun making these pants and wearing them. And the sewing part was so much fun and so enjoyable and super efficient. So I hope you learned something. And if you did, you know what you got to do. You got to hit that subscribe button. It helps me a lot and I really do appreciate it. So until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.